tonight, eh?
Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. So, what's that word, Bruce, for when the sound that changes? Like if you see singers do it, they move the microphone back and forth.
All right.
What is that?
Oh, loud.
Well, you're an engineer. There must be like some sort of mod.
I'm not an audio engineer.
Yeah, but doesn't being an engineer cover pretty much everything?
No, I never driven a train.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I've been in the cab of one and had a ride in one, but I've never driven one.
So, let's say modulation. I don't think
That's a good. That's probably a good, right? Modulation, input.
I don't think that's it. Input. Yeah, voice input, volume input. I don't know. It's got to be some word for it.
Yeah.
Anyways, when we have the guest on that we're going to have on tonight, let's make sure he doesn't do that.
Okay.
Because I was going to get him a headset because I only talked to him like 2 days ago, and I thought I'll get him an overnight headset. And then Amazon said, no, that's not happening, buddy. It's not coming till 3 days. So now I guess
Amazon let you down.
I guess he lives somewhere where the truck couldn't get to in 2 days or something.
Huh.
So anyways, Bruce, before we go on, can you just clarify, is this the first podcast since the last podcast?
Let me look. Well, my whiteboard says, but I don't think I updated that after the last one. So let me look at my book again. We're on page 75 now, and page 75, line number 26. Yes, this is correct. I'll have to make a note to update my whiteboard there, and then we're good to go for next time.
All right, cool. So tonight we're going to have Dave, but I know I'm not going to pronounce his last name correctly, so we'll wait till he gets out here.
Okay.
But he has a really cool Conrail layout. He lives somewhere in New Jersey. He works for the New Jersey transit system, and he seems like a swell guy, so I think we should just get right to it.
Get right to it. And some we liked him so much we just stuck him on the stool outside the green room this time. So we can just wave him up and he'll be able to see us.
I know this will be broadcast in January or 1st of February, but today I'm very excited because I'm getting the T-shirts more and more organized as each day goes by.
Ooh!
So eventually I am going to be caught up, and everybody will have the T-shirt that they're owed.
Nice.
Perfect.
Exactly.
All right, so let's just yell, "Hey, Dave, come on into the studio." Dave.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
There he is.
The handle was a little stuck there. I forced my way in. Hope that wasn't any problem for you guys.
No, that's okay. We forgot to move the piano from in front of the door.
Well, that makes a little sense for everybody then. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's good to be with you guys tonight. What a pleasure.
Well, why don't you wait?
Pleasure is ours.
Yeah, pleasure is ours. But why don't you wait for about an hour and a half and see how you feel then?
Yeah,
fair enough.
Dave, how do you pronounce your last name?
Abeles.
See,
it's Abeles. Abeles. It's a name that's actually out of Prague in the Czech Republic back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't have guessed that. I had Abeles, but I never got the E's at the end.
Right. We've heard it pronounced in a number of different ways, and in fact, I heard a rumor that you heard that I worked for NJ Transit, and we have a morning call every day, and the morning call starts out with the president of the railroad, greeting everybody that's in the room, and they go around on the phone and they talk to everybody that's on the phone. And he's so far he's been a great boss to work for, but he has yet to get my name right on the phone. So it's Abeles, it's Abeles, Abeles. We've heard every iteration.
It's actually not that hard to pronounce when you Abeles is pretty easy to say.
Yeah, when you look at it and see it, it all makes perfect sense.
It doesn't make any sense to me, but it's easy to say. Abeles, Dave Abeles.
Yeah, well, right, and so once people learn it, it's usually pretty straightforward. But but it's a challenging one. When you look at it at face glance, it's definitely not as straightforward as it may seem.
Yeah, it's a poser.
You need an extra E.
A poser.
Yeah.
I just called my son that tonight. That's a great term. Thank you.
A poser.
Yeah, he was being a poser. He was refusing to go to bed, which is why we're getting started so late.
How old is he?
This particular one is 2.5.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So he's the youngest of our three, and I love him. It's an amazing experience. It's a different ride every day. And my wife is doing an incredible job keeping it all running. But Pete, who's the little guy, we call him Ziggy because he's a big dude. And so we called him the Big Zig, and now he's just Ziggy. Ziggy decided he was going to, I'm not tired. And I said, you're a poser. And he said, I'm not a poser. You are.
Wow.
And I said, excuse me. And he said, I'm sorry, Dad. And I said, wow, a rare victory.
Yeah.
Well, here's something I did.
How many sons? Do you have 3 sons?
I've got a daughter, Susie, who's 7, about 7.5. And she's a character in her own right. And then Teddy, Theodore, my middle guy, he's going to be 5 just after Christmas in December, and then Pete, who's 2.5.
Excellent.
I bet Susie was thrilled to get another brother when the day.
Susie was hoping.
Yeah.
She was hoping for a sister, but she's been a great big sister, and it's amazing when you watch kids do what they do. I mean, the way they learn, especially amongst themselves, when they have to figure things out amongst themselves, is really spectacular. And she's been great. I mean, yeah, the usual trials and tribulations and so, but just a real pleasure overall. And I owe a lot of that to my wife because, anybody that's working spends too much time at work, and that's how it goes.
Yes. Well, 35 years ago, I brought home over 35 years ago, I brought home a beautiful bouncing baby boy, and now I got a drinking buddy.
See, that's a quiet hope that I have, but I can't say that too loud. You don't want to drink beer with your 2.5-year-old too often.
No.
And to be
might be okay with a light beer.
And to be completely honest, I only really realized that in a recent podcast we were talking, and I used to always say, I got this guy living in my house, and of course he's since moved out. He hasn't paid any. He lives in I have a very small apartment building, and he lives in one of the apartments. And boy, I can hardly wait till he pays rent. That's going to be an exciting day. but then we were talking about something, and suddenly somehow it came around, and it's like, yeah, now I got this drinking buddy because we go to hockey games together and drink beer, and he's a drinking buddy, which is great.
Well, I mean, that's incredible. That's something I think we all hope for. Anybody that's got kids would love someday to be able to be in your shoes there. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, but beer's kind of expensive at where the Leafs play, so it's not that great.
Well, you can make him pay for it, though.
I could. Then I'd have to deal with his mother. So I mean, there's all that.
Well, I guess there's a dark side to everything.
Yeah, no, he's a good guy.
I can see this going on. Hey, Dad, do you want a beer? Yeah, sure. Give me $20.
Actually, to be completely honest, what's thrown me off in the last couple of years is we've now arrived at that stage where apparently I'm not an idiot, and he has been paying for the beer, and he has been paying for stuff, and I'm kind of like, who are you, and where did my kid go?
Yeah.
And man, it's, to hear you guys talk like that, that's such good advice. And early on in having kids, everybody says, oh boy, appreciate those times. And meanwhile, you're sleep deprived. You're frustrated with your spouse. The kid's not sleeping, or is sleeping too much, or is eating, they're throwing up. There's always something. You're just at wit's end. And everybody says, oh, make sure you appreciate that time. And it's the last thing you want to hear, but it's great advice, because even now, I mean, again, my kids are little. You guys, we've already talked about it. And already, I mean, she's 7.5. She's going to be 8 years old. She's already in 2nd grade. I remember when that little girl was in my arms and was, 20 inches long. And now she's, got her own personality, and she's able to push back, and she's got preferences and ideas, and she's excited. And it does go quick, because once the innocence is gone, man, it's these kids grow right up. It's quick.
Actually, the best advice I ever got was my son's elementary school principal just thought he was the greatest thing because he had a lot of personality. And I was saying something one day because he wasn't doing something right, or he wasn't doing as well in school and something. And he said, you know what? Just love him. He'll turn out fine. And he was right. Just love him.
More sage advice. Yep. And we all take it so seriously these days. Got to relax a little bit. Everybody's got to have a beer and take it easy.
Well, Bruce knows me very well. We're good. We're best buddies. And Bruce, I got to tell you, it was sometime in the last year or two. We were at a Leaf game, and he turns to me and he goes, "Hey, you want a beer?" And I'm like, who's that? And who's he talking to? And it was like, and I kind of go, yeah, sure.
What country do you think this is?
I
love it.
All right, enough of this. So, Dave, we need to have your entire life history here. So, you sent in, how long have you been listening to the podcast?
I would say the first time I heard it was about, I would say probably 2 years ago or so. A good buddy of mine at NJ Transit, and he's actually become a good model railroad buddy of mine as well, a fellow named Rich Wisniewski, was one of the first people to turn me on to the whole AML scene. And mentioned, he's like, there's some really good stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, podcasts. I've listened to a couple craft beer podcasts, and one podcast one time for a while about model trains. I don't remember which one it was. This is, years and years ago. Okay. But I do ride the train to and from work. And so I turned it on one afternoon on the train on the way home. And it was one of the earlier ones, and I forget exactly who guys, I think it was one of the Kelly questions things. And I was like, this is fascinating, because they're not talking about trains. Like, it's a modeler's train. It's supposed to be about trains, right? Rich said it was about model trains. And we're talking about islands and the desert, and we're talking about, do you like beer? And it's like, well, yeah, I can get behind this. so as time went on, I certainly have a couple of my favorites that I'm sure we'll talk about over the course of the evening. But it's a really neat idea, because the hobby is full of fascinating people. So, long story short, I would say about 2.5, 3 years.
Okay. Bruce, I was going to say something, and I can't remember what it was. Man, it was really good too. All right, let's just get to the nitty gritty here, because I got a feeling this is going to be fairly involved. Better take notes, Bruce. Okay. So are you a lifelong model railroad? Let's get through the early part quickly, because I like to always ask everybody, how'd you start in the hobby?
Sure. Okay. Well, I've loved trains and trains in general, I would say, since before I can remember. I was born in 1977 in a hospital where my mom worked as a registered nurse, and she stayed home with the kids for a couple of years while my sister and brother were born. And so I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s in northwestern New Jersey, around a bunch of branch lines that were abandoned by Conrail before I was born in 1976. So lots of ghosts of railroads, but I loved it. I had the books, and I would anybody that would talk about trains with me, and I loved it. I'd be, as much as I could get around it, I would. And so my first official train set, was the beautiful Tyco Silver Streak train set. Early 80s, 82, 83, I would say. I was, I'm sure the packaging says for 8 or older, and I was definitely too young. So you break all the steps off and all that stuff. But I still actually have one of the cars. One of the cars has actually been redecorated as a Conrail maintenance away car, and is living on the Onondaga Cutoff on my layout. I think it's nice to have something that links you to the origin, I should say. But yeah, that was the first train set. It was a little, very toyish train set with a shiny fake Alco C424. I think it's a C424 that they have in that set. And then a couple really garish cars, nothing prototype related at all.
So how old do you think you
gotta
were?
be careful with Tycho there. Buddy Tony Cook will have a word or two with you.
Yeah.
Hey, and I'll tell you what, just as I can say it's a toy, the best part about it for me is that it was a toy because it got me started and I never looked back. So, I mean, the thing lasted through little hands and my little brother's hands. He was 2 years younger. So it stood the test of time. It did what it needed to do.
So how old would you say you were? Like, what's your first memory of model railroading?
Ooh, there you go. I would say it was running that Tycho set around the Christmas tree. And I would say this is probably whenever I got it. I would, if I had to guess, I'd say 82. Because I remember my brother being little enough that when I put the Wheaties cereal that we had, or toasted oat bran, something like that, some cereal we had in the cupboard, I figured that would make a good gondola load, and had a bright green gondola, Burlington Northern gondola. And I dumped all the cereal in the gondola, and it was running around in the circle on the floor. My brother would eat the cereal out of the gondola, and I got upset. I said, Ben, that's the load. That's the load. You can't eat the load. And so that's I haven't thought about that in many years. That's a good question. But yeah, that had to have been my first model railroad memory. And
were you doing it through your teenage years and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, to some degree. I mean, it really, it ebbed and flowed to some degree. I didn't grow up in a railroad family. My dad was a school teacher, and he grew up on a farm himself in Chester, New Jersey. So his passions were yard work, outside work. When he took a break, it was team sports. He'd paint houses in the summer. So, he was always busy doing something productive. And he's a guy, and my mom too, actually, they both done the Peace Corps. So they believed very strongly in public service. And so they were volunteering here, volunteering there. We went to church and all that stuff. And, we were really taught to look at like authority and respect authority, not just resist it for resistance' sake, but to appreciate what it has to offer and listen when an adult tells you something to do, you say, yes, sir, and you shake a hand and away you go. And so, it's hard to put a finger on, all the early details there, but
you were
his interest.
You're interested. You were interested all through your teenage years. I guess what I'm going at is, you're one of these people, like people seem to think that the hobby's made up of older people, and I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of almost everybody I've talked to on this podcast, maybe except for the exception of 2 or 3 or 4 people, has been model railroaders since they can remember. And it sounds like you're the same way. Like you were, like when by the time you got to your teenage years, you were interested in it, and away you went, kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, and the point I was trying to make is just that I sort of had to make that time around what my dad needed me to do around the house and around the property. And so I had a little 4x8 sheet of plywood that we bought at a church auction or something like that when I was in, 3rd or 4th grade or what have you. And it was in the basement of this old farmhouse we grew up in. And so, it was certainly model railroading, but I didn't have anybody guiding me through a scratch building or the weathering or, what the good brands of locomotives were. And so I just kind of took what was there and we had fun with it. We had a great time with it because it's what we knew. And so with my brother at my side, we sort of dug in. And through the teenage years, one of my best buddies to this day, really my best friend to this day, this fellow named Jack Trabacchino, who's been integral in the Onondaga Cutoff. And I met him in 5th grade. So we were 10 years old. Grew up in Long Valley, New Jersey, Morris County, sort of northwest in the hills and valleys of western New Jersey. And these guys, I hadn't met anybody my age that liked trains until I met Jack. And when I met Jack, it was like I had actually tailed off. I was into Top Gun and F-14 Tomcats and naval aviation when I was in 4th grade. And then when I met Jack, here's a kid that loves trains and has a train set at home. He's got a 3-rail O-gauge train set on the bottom bunk of a bunk bed. And it opened my eyes to the fact that, whoa, there are other people out here that love trains. Until that time, Model Railroader was sort of a lifeline. Like the magazine would come every month and I'd look forward to it. So yeah, Jack and I sort of hung on. We really, so for me, it was reinvigorated around 10 or 11 and we carried it right through, until college.
Well, that's cool then. So, and did you take a break in college or you guys kept at it or?
Well, basically, high school is always tumultuous. There's everybody goes different ways, and so Jack was with one crowd of friends, and I was with the marching band kids freshman year of high school. And Jack ended up joining the marching band later. He ended up playing in the drum line, and I was playing trumpet. And we came back together as high school went on, and really with the friendship, with a new level of appreciation for the different things we each appreciated. And it was amazing because as we went to college, of course, I was living in a dorm. There's no layout. At least there wasn't. I didn't bring a layout to the dorm. My layout lived at home and gathered dust while I was up at school. But what I could do at college was continue to put equipment together. And so I every year I'd bring a bunch of blue box kits up there. In some cases, some paint and some decals and what have you. And I put together. I would just build cars in my spare time at college at night in the dorm room. It was a great way to pass the time. When I wasn't out doing band stuff or what have you. And so it was nice. It was over time. I kind of developed a theory where it was nice to be able to make progress every day or two, even if it wasn't on something specific, so that the next day that progress was in the past and you can build on it and move forward. And that's worked out pretty well. I mean, it's amazing how much time it takes to do some of this stuff. And it's nice to be able to look back on these cars and see something I built in college 20 years ago. It's like, wow, that car is 20 years old, but I feel like I built it like 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So where did you go to college?
I went to Syracuse University.
Home of the Orangemen.
Home of the Orangemen up in central New York. And enjoyed football and basketball and lacrosse again through the eyes of the marching band, which was a good experience because it encouraged you to be active and get out there and see these events. And at that time it was, Donovan McNabb was playing for the football team, and we had John Wallace on the basketball team. Both of them went off to be professionals eventually, and it was fun. It was a big shock for a kid from small town New Jersey to go to this university where the university is really the center of the town. Syracuse is a classic American Rust Belt town where it had its heyday with major industry in the 40s and 50s, and then the industry moved out over time, and the university's been the anchor, and they've really done a nice job integrating the town with the university. And, in my time there, we really had a blast. It was a lot of fun. The stadium had a bunch of college kids in it, but would have a bunch of locals. We called them townies, and the townies would come, and that was their professional sports team. Everybody wore a Syracuse sweatshirt. So it was really neat, really neat.
Well, who doesn't love the Syracuse Orangemen? I mean, seriously. I mean, that was when I was from not that. I was a Syracuse fan too. Was there wasn't there a store in Syracuse back then called Central Hobbies or something like
Central Hobby Supply? Yep, Central Hobby Supply. It was out east of town, not too far from the DeWitt Yard, actually, the old New York Central DeWitt Yard. And I made regular appearances there. Absolutely. That, and there was a camera store downtown too. At that time I was shooting with a little Nikon FG. It was a little all manual camera that I'd been set up with in high school. Again, Dad's a school teacher and a volunteer and a sort of a man of the earth doing his gardening stuff on his spare time. So he wasn't a photographer. He wasn't a model or anything like that at all. But some of my friends' dads were. And so one of my friends' dads talked to my parents, and with my interest in photography for the prototype, he set me up with this little Nikon FG. And eventually it developed a light leak or whatever, in the slides. And I took it into this camera store in Syracuse to get it repaired. But yeah, Central Hobby Supply, that was a great store back in the day.
Oh man, that was an awesome store.
Yeah, that was one of those things I stumbled into. I had a lot of family history in the central New York region. My mom's family is all from up there, all through Onondaga County. They bumped around a bit during the war and then after the war, but sort of settled in this little town called Skaneateles, which was a manufacturing and a lake town through the 50s and 60s. And so we would go up to visit family through the 80s, and I was very familiar with central New York, with the culture up there, the atmosphere. But I never knew about Central Hobby Supply. That place, again, in the 80s, it was different. Well, there's so many of these stores that were around, but even then, that was a special store.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of.
It was a great store. Hey, Bruce?
Yes.
Are you doing your laundry?
No, why?
Do I hear a dryer going? Is that at your house, Dave? I hear some sort of it sounds like a dryer.
Yeah, I think the oil burner over in the other corner kicked on here.
Okay, yeah, we just installed that actually. We had we had central air, but we thought it was Bruce's idea, actually. He said, hey, you know what? Why don't we get one of those big tanks and have an oil-burning furnace instead? And I said, sure, we can give it a try if you want.
It kicked on a little while ago, and I said, oh, man, I hope that doesn't through.
That's fine. That's fine.
It kicked off there. Well, I guess we all spent a lot of time in our basement spaces if we're model railroaders, and so it's authentic, if nothing else.
Exactly.
You know what I was thinking, though, Lionel?
What's that?
When he was talking about skinny Abeles, if you saw that word written out, you wouldn't have a hope in hell of getting it right pronunciation.
Not even close. Not even close. And where's skinny Abeles again? I know of it.
So my mom, she grew up there, and she used to say, well, David, when anybody wants to talk about that town, you say it's pronounced Skinny Atlas.
Right.
Just like Abeles, right? So Skinny Atlas, that's like, oh, everybody will remember that. Well, yeah. I mean, it's one of those Iroquois tribal names in central New York, like Onondaga, like Cayuga, or any of those lake names up there, Oswego, Owasco, and it's a name from a different language that's translated in. But I would say it's about 20 miles southwest of Syracuse, if I had to guess without looking at a map.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been through there on my bike. A little bit off topic, Bruce. You know what I learned today?
What's that?
Pennsylvania is an old Indian word that means left lane closed for 82 miles.
Oh, really? Wow. I was wondering about the origin of that, but
yeah. Okay, so you gone to did you at any point belong to a club or anything?
No. Well, I guess I belonged to the Syracuse chapter of the NRHS for a little while when I was at college. Again, just looking for community. I was surprised going to a school that was as big as Syracuse, and especially for engineering. Is my naive vision of engineering when I was young, was through my dad, again, who was a school teacher. And so we didn't have a whole lot of perspective, I should say. I figured there was going to be a bunch of people in my class that were model railroaders that love trains.
Right.
And Syracuse, we had about 90 people that started out in the civil and environmental engineering program. And I was the only one that liked trains. So I said, man, because then I'd found Jack, back in middle school and high school. So there was somebody to tag along with. Another buddy of mine named Mark Jacob. He was another fella I met the same year that I met Jack. And he loves the short lines. Jack and I were big mainline guys. We wanted to go out and watch, Conrail move their big trains around. Mark loved the Morristown and Erie and the short line scene, Alcos in central New York and New England and such. Canada, big CP and CN fan. Again, from Morris County, New Jersey. But, Syracuse didn't have any sort of model railroad club. It didn't have any sort of people in my class. So I joined the NRHS up there just to be part of something for I think I lasted about 2 years in that club up there. But they had a lot of infighting, and, they ended up hosting I think it was the National Convention in 1998, if I'm not mistaken. Where they had excursions and all that stuff. So it was cool to be part of that stuff, but that's about the only railroad club I've ever been involved with.
Yeah. And when you say the NRHS, that's the National Railroad Historical Society.
Correct. Yeah. That's one of the handful of national American organizations that are interested in preservation of railroad equipment and facilities and history.
Were you just taking a drink there?
Yes,
yeah,
that's exactly what I was.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Oh, all right.
I'm sorry. Did we not? I guess we didn't. I guess we forgot to tell him that. Drink. That's a new. Hey, Bruce. I'm sorry.
Mute when you drink.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Dave. That was rude of me, and I'm trying to become a better broadcaster, but it's not working.
Well, that happens. So, can I ask permission to take a drink next time, or should I just refrain?
No, but
just mute yourself.
I think Dave.
Or you do this.
Yeah.
I see Michael. I just saw the mic. So yeah, you have to excuse me. I'm learning as we go.
No, I think Dave, you're going to be credited with another A Modeler's Life keynote phrase, drink plenty of fluids before coming on the podcast.
But not too many.
Yeah, you got to find just the right amount of fluids before coming on the podcast.
Yeah, I thank you for the direction. I'm learning as I go.
We hope to have you as a guest soon, but please remember, drink plenty of fluids before arriving.
Before and immediately after.
Okay, so now we've done. So why'd you go to university? What did you take there?
I majored in civil engineering up there.
Okay,
and the reason.
And now you own a Burger King?
Sometimes I wonder if I made the right career choice. I'll admit it. But I majored in engineering. Again, high school was kind of an up and down period for me because my mom was at the time fighting cancer, actually, which is something you and I have in common, at least vicariously.
Right.
And it's she passed away in my senior year of high school in 1995 from a cancer called multiple myeloma. Which is bone marrow cancer. And she'd fought it. It was a really amazing thing to watch. I mean, even as a kid growing up, because she just fought it. She fought it and fought it tooth and nail. But the technology in 1986, 1990 and 1993, just it wasn't where it is now. And so it was a pretty brutal fight. But as a result, we were sort of occupied with a lot of that stuff as I went through high school. So here I am having fun in the marching band and having fun with Jack, playing trains in the basement and up in the train room, what have you. And then you're fighting that thing on the side. And it's an early lesson in life balance, I guess. But, so she had passed on and I'm trying to make a decision about college as far as what to major in. And, Dad, he says, well, if you want to do something in business, you can major in business, he says, but I think it might be a good idea for you to major in engineering if you think you can handle it, because you can take an engineering degree and go into business, but you can't take a business degree and go into engineering.
Right.
And it was one of those early moments with my dad where I said, wow, that's heavy, but accurate advice. And so I majored in civil engineering. I thought about going to mechanical, and my advisors at school said, well, do you want to deal more with rolling stock and locomotives, or do you want to deal more with outside, with the track and with the bridges? I said, well, I love bridges. And they said, well, then start with civil and see what happens. And so that's the long story how I ended up in civil engineering. And as predicted, it kicked my butt. It was a strenuous program. I learned it.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry I cut you off. So
no, it's okay.
I just want to say before we went on, that must have been very, very. We don't want to dwell on this, but it must have certainly been very difficult for you to lose your mom when you were in high school, even at the end of high school.
Yeah, it really scrambled the eggs, as I put it, to when we talk about it with other people. You take so many things for granted. At least I took so many things for granted when I was a kid. And, again, school teacher's salary, we're never rolling in money or anything, but we didn't have to worry about things. I mean, it was a steady income, and my dad worked in the summers painting houses, so it worked out all right. But my mom, she loved family. She actually had been in the Peace Corps as well. She was another big volunteer, and she'd grown up in Central New York. She was one of 7 brothers and sisters, and so I have a ton of cousins on that side, the Dean family, and all very musical like my mom was. I mean, the music has been a huge part of my life, touching on that quick. But losing mom in high school was a defining moment of my senior year of high school. And it makes you don't get to choose some things in life. It just is what it is. And
yeah.
It's no one would. I don't think anybody would choose that. And Lionel, you certainly understand that firsthand. So
yeah. Well, I just didn't want to pass over that because I think that'd be very difficult for you. But let's get back on the more cheerful stuff. Because I don't know, it just seems like that would be a very difficult thing to do.
Well, it is, but the thing is what that does is it lends balance to the good stuff in life, and I think that balance, as I think about it, as I'm getting older. I mean, granted, at 42, a lot of guys are like, "Oh, listen to him, he's talking about getting older." Nah, it's been 42 full years. I feel like I've been through a few things, and not that there isn't more to go through and more to learn, but. You can't, I don't feel that in life you can appreciate the good stuff until you've had a taste of the darkness.
That's for sure. Good point. Absolutely.
So, the hobby has been a source of light for me. I mean, all through those dark times, trains Trains don't leave you alone. Trains are always there. You press stop, you go back downstairs, and there they are to start again. And it's always, even in a dark afternoon or a dark life or a dark month or whatever weight you're carrying, the railroad in general, but especially model trains, it's a place to escape. And there's times when that's just a necessary thing, part of the equation.
Yeah.
I remember talking to somebody from the Model Railroad Industry Association. This be 30 or so years ago. And he said what he thought was one of the big draws of model railroad, besides everything else, is that it's your own little world, and you can go home, just like I said, after whatever miserable day you've had or what's going on in the world, you can escape to your own little world and forget about life for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great community. And I mean, David, we'll talk more about it, but I mean, that's why I'm so excited about social media, how it's making the community grow. And it just is, you put all those factors together. I mean, you know what I think. So Dave, you get out of university, you're now a civil engineer, and what happens next as far as the hobby goes?
Well, what I love about this hobby is that it really does grow with you. You carry it with your passion through your whole life. And when you need it, it's there. And when you're working on something else, it'll almost wait for you a little bit. You can kind of delve in when you need to be there and back off when you need to do something else. And so hobby wise, by the time college had come and gone, I built a bunch of cars like we were talking about. And I've always been a lifelong fan of the Rio Grande, the Santa Fe, the Southern Pacific, the great Southwestern railroads. There was an article in Trains magazine. I want to say, I think it's July 1985. It was the cover article. It was called "The Unknown Rio Grande," and it was by a fellow named Mark Hemphill. Fascinating guy. He went on to be the editor of Trains after some working in the industry and working in a couple different industries ahead of time, and then ended up dispatching and working in consulting, and went to Iraq to rebuild their railroad for a while. So just a really dynamic character who's done a lot of different things. And that article, I fell in love with the American West in one fell swoop. In 1985, I would have been 8 years old. A lot of time on your hands. Again, not a lot of railroad around. And I probably ran into this article, at the newsstand or something like that. I mean, it's something I saw just in passing and picked it up, begged my parents for it, and there it was. And it's such a beautiful photo essay of watching trains along the Rio Grande that I fell in love with the idea of the American West. So a couple of years later, my dad and mom took a train. They stuck us on a train, the whole family, all five of us, my brother Ben, my sister Amanda, and myself. And then my parents, we got on the train in Trenton, New Jersey, the Broadway Limited, back when there was a Broadway Limited.
Right.
And we took it to Chicago, spent a couple of days in Chicago. Went to see that fabulous O-scale layout that was there at the Museum of Science and Industry. And again, they weren't railroad parents, but they put up with my begging. So I was able to see, so I can't complain too loud. But then we hopped on the California Zephyr and took it out to Denver and rented a car. And from there, we drove basically the whole Rio Grande main line out towards Salt Lake City, and then down through the Canyon lands, back across through New Mexico, and then back up from the south through the Four Corners and up into Denver to go back home on the train as well. And it was just, at this point, so this is 1987.
Right.
So it just completely that was 1989. Completely transformative experience. I'm 12 years old, and you see in the American West for the first time.
Yeah.
And it just, you're coming from New Jersey, it's all treed in, there's some farmland, beautiful, but I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, we went out there and it just changes your perspective on how small trains really are in the grand scheme of things, how small people are.
Yeah.
There's a lot of space, a lot of grandeur out there. And so when I got out of college, even in college, I started to talk to Jack. I said, man, what if we get one of these USA rail passes and travel Amtrak and go out and watch some trains out west? It's the late 90s at this point, and Santa Fe is turning into BNSF. Rio Grande is turning into Southern Pacific. Union Pacific was what it was, but it had swallowed Western Pacific and Mopac in the 80s. So it's a changing scene, and we had nothing else to lose. And for $350, you could buy a pass that got you something absurd, 30,000 miles on Amtrak within a calendar year with no reservations.
Wow.
So you just show up with your duffel bag, and you rode in coach, but a bunch of 20-something kids don't care. Rode in coach, and we met all kinds of crazy people. But we traveled. So we got out to Chicago. We got out to spent time in Flagstaff, Arizona, Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Went back to Flagstaff on a separate trip to see the last of the Santa Fe. And it was just, for two kids that grew up on Conrail in the woods of New Jersey, which is, there's mainline freights, but it was never all that busy. It wasn't really a trunk line, so to speak.
Right.
But Jack and I got out there and saw that stuff, and what a different world. It just,
Right.
And even today that I took my trusty Nikon FG was with me, and we went out there, and I have a bunch of slides from those trips on Kodachrome, Ektachrome, what have you, Fujichrome. What a pleasure. It was just a great experience.
So you fell in love with the West, the American West, and you're now modeling. You have a Rio Grande layout in your basement.
This is the funniest thing, right? So
well, let's get to that. All right. So when did you because you have we'll get to this. All right. So you and your buddy Jack, that's a pretty cool, that rail pass idea. I mean, man, what a great idea to do for a couple of rail fans to be traveling all around.
What a great experience.
Yeah. Like, what a great idea. I mean, holy mackerel. And
I to feel fortunate. I mean, Jack was mowing lawns. I was painting houses with my dad. So we'd saved up cash. And then we both, that year after sophomore year of college, we had enough cash. At that point, my mom had passed on. And unfortunately, my dad was dealing with my sister, who was very, very ill at the time. And so they were flying a lot, trying to find treatments for her. My brother was doing what he did. And I had a couple of weeks. And so Jack and I, put together these trips, these month-long Amtrak sojourns, paid for everything with cash that we'd saved up from our work around the house kinds of jobs. And yeah, it was transformative. Those slides, even today, it's hard to believe I was even there taking those pictures.
Yeah.
Definitely a different world. So glad I did it. It was a blessing.
So, okay. So did you eventually got married? Eventually you bought a house? Like, what was happening between the rail pass days and when you started your layout? Like, were you just kind of kicking around with other guys? Did you meet other people? Did you belong to the NMRA? Where were you at?
I was doing a lot of music at the time. We mentioned before, I was growing up playing trumpet. My mom was a musician, a high school musician. She played trombone back at Skaneateles High School in the 1950s and 60s. And so my mom's brothers, John Dean, Peter Dean, Bob Dean, and one of their friends, Holly Gregg, all from Skaneateles in the 50s. They'd put together in the 60s, they put a rock and roll band together, sort of a folk rock band. They called themselves the Dean Brothers. And then went by different names. They were the Ridgewoods for a while. But we used to go up a couple times a year to hear these guys play. And of course, these are the fathers of my cousins. So there's cousins my age, and we're going to listen to my uncles sing harmony. And they did the Beach Boys and the Beatles and Crosby, Stills and Nash and a bunch of their own tunes, which were beautifully put together. They did, Motown stuff and just anything that had vocal harmony was right up their alley. And so we would make these trips up all through middle school, high school, and in high school we started our own band. We called ourselves Hole in the Floor First, which was named after the wooden hole through the floor of the living room.
Right.
Very high tech, and we were terrible.
Right.
Terrible. It was awful.
Okay.
So we had fun with it, but it wasn't very good. And so that came and went, and then we moved on and called ourselves a couple of different names with people coming and going, and we ended up settling in. My brother had some very close friends, and we ended up playing a lot of music. And so through my 20s, after Syracuse, after traveling out west a little bit, filling in the gaps there, on the free time, we would do a lot of playing. So we played all the local taverns. We played in New York City a bit. A lot of singing, a lot of harmony, a lot of great memories, a lot of fun.
Cool. And
I'd gotten a job out of college at New Jersey Transit.
Wow.
So yeah, that's sort of its own story that'll take a few minutes, but it's
you know what, Dave? Don't take this the wrong way, because I am really enjoying listening to you, as I'm sure Bruce is. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think there's a story that you tell, Dave, that doesn't take a few minutes.
I think you're right.
But so far they've all been worth it.
Yeah, they've all been good stories. Yeah.
Well, I've heard that before, but not from you guys, and it's consistent advice.
Well, and I believe this is the first. I believe this is probably the first part of your 37-part trilogy.
Well, except that it's my trilogy, and that I'm honored to be part of it. This podcast to start with, and I appreciate the questions. It's fun to talk about this stuff. I haven't thought about a lot of this stuff in many years.
Yeah, well, it's all great stuff. So okay, so right out of college, you get a job with the New Jersey Transit, and you're doing music. So what kind of how did you manage to land a job with New Jersey Transit? They were looking for guys who were qualified, kind of thing, or what?
Well, that's the story. So I'll make it as quick as I can. So junior year of college, I threw an application in. Jack had said, "Hey, I'm at Rutgers. I'm going to apply for this internship at NJ Transit." I said, "Well, I don't really want to work for a passenger railroad. I'd rather work for a freight railroad." And Jack's like, "Well, they're local." And it occurred to me at the time that my sister, who was still very sick at that time, she was going to be home, and my mom had already passed on. So it really would be a good idea for me to be around home. So I stuck in my application for NJ Transit and heard nothing. So I ended up working at a job my junior year of college, at a local engineering firm. And, it was engineering. It was soil sampling, nothing that really stirred my soul. So I go back to school for my senior year. I get a phone call in the spring of my senior year from Transit looking for me to get an internship. And I said, "An internship?" I said, "Well, I sent in an application a year and a half ago for that." "Well, all I know is that, it says here you're going to be a civil engineer and you're at Syracuse, and we'd love to have you in for an internship." And I said, "Well, okay. Yeah. I mean, how much does it pay?" "Oh, $10 an hour." I said, "Great." So I said, "When do I start?" He says, "Well, next week." I said, "Well, sir, I'm actually at college. Like, I'm not going to be able to get home." He said, "Well, you start when you can. Let me know." So turns out I went into Transit. It was an internship. Now, of course, I'm a senior. I've graduated from Syracuse, and they hired me thinking that I was a junior because they were looking at the resume for a year ago. So I asked around, and it turns out that resume pile went around Transit for a full year. This guy was told he was going to lose funding if he didn't have an intern to figure it out. And so his boss gave him a stack of resumes. My last name is Abeles. He looked at it. He called it. I happened to be at home on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. And he said, "I'm glad you picked up, because if you didn't, I would have called the next resume."
Wow.
That's how I got a nod. Then it's even crazier because I started working my internship. It was fine. I was doing bus service planning and, bus counts at the Port Authority in New York City. The headquarters is in Newark. And as I talked to people around the company and stuff, I started asking, I'd left a full-time job, what's available. So I was talking to this one fella named Bill Lawson one day, who was in rail service planning. And he noticed that I had my tie on, and I had a tie clip. The tie clip was a treble clef, which someone had given me as a gift in high school. And he said, "Oh, you're a musician." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, what do you play?" And we got talking, and he said, "Well, he's like, you graduated? What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm looking for a job." He's like, "Well, here, you got to talk to this guy. This guy went to UConn, so he'll know Syracuse, and he's got an open job in his bridge inspection department." And sure enough, I talked to the guy, and he says, "When can you start?" I said, "As soon as my internship's over." So September 1st, 1999 is my first day on the railroad.
Oh, cool. And a treble clef is a note, a musical note, right?
It's that little, it looks like an ampersand. It's like a musical signature.
Right.
That goes in front of a line of music. So that tie clip is the reason I'm working at Transit.
Wow.
There you go.
And the fact,
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So here I am at 22 with these two absurd stories getting me started on the railroad. So I started as a bridge inspector, working out of the Red Bank office with a fellow named Jimmy Cannella, who was an old, leathery railroader with a lot of experience, very smart guy. He'd seen the whole railroad before. He had started working for the CNJ when he was a young man. And So he showed me the inside of every culvert. We climbed around all these bridges. We went up on the top of the movable bridges and drove all over New Jersey looking at train bridges. Meanwhile, I'm just grinning like a pig in poo.
Yeah.
Because I am seeing nothing but they're paying me to watch trains and watch them go over bridges. See if the bridge moves. Okay, that sounds great. So it's just fantastic. And so as time went on, I worked actually ended about 10 years in the bridge department. And on the railroad, they call it B&B, which stands for buildings and bridges, or bridges and buildings. And the second half of my career has been with the stations department. So I'm doing the building side now. Or second half of those 20 years, I should say. I'm not done yet, but it's been a fascinating up and down experience. Transit's a company that's, I hired on at a time when it was really doing well for itself. It was well funded, had some visionary leadership, a lot of railroaders running the show from the predecessor railroads, Conrail, CNJ, PR, or Penn Central, and Erie Lackawanna. And it's, in the last 10 years, we've had a real struggle with funding, with increased ridership and less resources, and some management changes that have been challenging to deal with on the floor.
All right. Well, we'll get back to that because we don't want to, because that all sounds very interesting, and I don't want to get too far off track. But so we know now that you work at New Jersey Transit and you work in the buildings department now. So you kind of run that department of keeping the station standing and all that kind of stuff. That's
basically it. So we have 166 stations on the whole system. That includes some that are managed by other people and by other railroads. The ones that are in New York State are managed actually by Metro North, but everything in the state of New Jersey is under my jurisdiction. Yes. So I'm what they call it, the general superintendent of stations. So we do. It sounds a lot more grand than it is. We worry about who's cleaning what and which elevator is working, and which door was unlocked and how the air conditioning is working. It's those sorts of issues. But the exciting part about it is that it's for a railroad, and your company moves 250,000 people a day to New York City, and what you do matters. So it's nice, even on a hard day, it's nice to know that I'm doing something that has some traction.
Yeah, it would be a great thing to be part of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's every day is different. It's a lot. I'm learning every single day.
So we'll get back to that because there's lots to tell us about the New Jersey transit system, I'm sure. But so now you're you started with New Jersey Transit when you were basically 22, 23 years old?
Literally right out of college. I mean, it was June of my senior year of college, just after I graduated. So I started at 22 and I'm at 42. And so September 1st, a couple months ago, I hit my 20th anniversary at NJ Transit.
All right, and you said at first you were part of the bridges department and you would watch trains go over bridges. Like, what were you watching for?
Well, bridge inspection is sort of an interesting subset of the railroad world because, a lot of people think of railroaders as the guy that runs the trains and the guy that the yard masters, the dispatchers, the train masters, the conductors, the engineers, the guys actually involved in train movement. But with the civil engineering background, for me, professionally, railroading is all of those things, but none of that can happen unless you've got the infrastructure guys on the ground that make the track, the bridges, signals and electrical and all that stuff work the way that it's supposed to. So yeah, bridge inspection on the railroad it's a lot of driving. It's a lot of coordination with different parties. And you want to, there's a federal regulation in America and likely in Canada as well, that you have to watch a bridge under load at least a certain number of times a year to watch if the bearings move and if the beams move, to look for cracks, to look for, signs of failure. And just watch the train, watch the movement over the course of the bridge, and it helps you make recommendations about how you want to make repairs going forward.
So you can tell just by the naked eye. You can look at a train going over a bridge, and you can look at the bridge and kind of go, okay, there might be a problem here, there might be a problem there.
Yeah, I mean, and again, very rarely does this stuff come up right away. Usually it's something you can see building over time. And so the on-the-job training is really vital. Even with an engineering background, learning how much is a lot when it comes to pumping, or learning what a failed bearing looks like, or, how much reduction. So how much steel has rusted away. They call that reduction in engineering. So you're looking at 20% reduction, 40% reduction, that kind of thing. Learning how to estimate that stuff. A lot of that comes from guys that have a good thumb on it. The guys that can look at something and feel it out. And then you get your engineers out there to actually analyze it, to measure it, compare it to the drawings, and make a recommendation on whether the bridge can be used or if there needs to be a speed restriction, that kind of things. One of the things that's a lot of modelers I think might be interested to know is that one of the most important factors in bridge safety is the speed of the train that goes over it. Not so much the weight. The weight is important over time, but one of the keys is to make sure that they call it impact load. So part of looking at a designing of a bridge, a train hits it at a certain speed, and that speed exponentially adds weight to the bridge.
Really?
So actually a square. So it's a factor. It's not just multiplied by 2; it's squared, multiplied by itself.
I got my hand up. Can I ask you a question?
You can ask a question.
So like if a train that's going 50 miles an hour will make more of an impact on the bridge than the train that's doing 20 miles an hour.
Correct, and exponentially so. So it's not just 2.5 times more; it's more like 10 times more.
Well, now you're going to have to explain how is that possible? Because to me, not being an engineer, I would have thought just the opposite. That the slower the train kind of creeps onto the bridge, the less, the more it's like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So can you give us a layman's explanation?
Yeah, part of it is that you're talking about a whole heck of a lot of weight. This is not an automobile. This is something that's thousands of tons. Even the locomotive itself is 250, 300 tons, without even blinking, even more than that in some cases. So the way the bridges were designed, it was for a certain, what they called it, a rating, a Cooper rating. E80 was the nickname they gave to it, which basically meant that there was 80,000 pounds per axle on the main axles on the locomotive. So when you look at the force that those weights make when they hit something, the faster you go, the harder that initial impact.
Wow.
And because of that hard initial impact, there's a bounce that comes with it. And next time you ride a train, or even if you're in a truck or a bus, you hit a big bump, and they hit it, and it's a slam when they hit it.
Right.
And it's almost like you think about creeping through a pothole. If you take your car and you drive through a big pothole, you're better off slowing down and bumping over it nice and slow than you are hitting it at 70 miles an hour.
Okay.
That's the same physical reality that you're talking about when it comes to impact load. And so as a bridge engineer, you're out there watching this stuff go on, and that's part of what they want you to do, is sort of get a feel for how it looks. Does that train slam into this? If you sight down the rail, it's almost like model railroading when you lay track. You look down the railhead and you can see a dip in the rail.
Oh, really?
And is that dip? Oh, yeah. If that dip is there, that's something they have to look at. They got to get the tamper out. They got to measure it. They got to make sure how things go. And they can alleviate some of it by just doing track work on both sides of the bridge. But it's, again, every day was a little bit different. We dealt with all kinds of different bridges. NJ Transit was a Conrail property originally. So we have Delaware Lackawanna and Western bridges, Erie bridges, Pennsylvania Railroad bridges, CNJ bridges that were replaced by Conrail, bridges that were replaced by the Turnpike Authority when they built a bridge over the highway. So all different kinds of designs and structures, and it really is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it would be. It would be endlessly fascinating, I would think. Bruce, you got to be interested in this, being an engineer yourself.
Yeah, we took some of this stuff in first year engineering statics and dynamics course. So, rate of load being applied and things like that.
That's exactly right. Yep. And Bruce, what kind of engineer were you, or are you?
I am a geological engineer.
I'll tell you.
Wow.
But the first year of engineering was common to all the different courses at the university, so everybody took the same thing. And then as you went through, you got more and more into your specialty of engineering.
Exactly right. That's how we did it as well. And geotechnical fascinates me. That's
yeah.
It's its own branch, and the way you guys are able to look at and touch. There's a tangibility to what you guys do, which I've always been fascinated by, where you can take a look at a soil sample and grind it in your fingers and get a feel for what you're talking about. And there's a whole bunch of properties that go along with that. I've always admired that.
Yeah, there's a lot of magic those guys do.
Yeah. our friend Kaylee Zhang, who is lives down there in West Hartford and works at Tom's Trains and is the nutmeg girl for the nutmeg division of the NMRA and whatever region, Northeast region. She's an engineer too. You know what kind of engineer she is?
I do not. She has visited the Onondaga Cutoff, but I did not know she was an engineer.
I'll tell you what kind of engineer she is. She's a damn good one.
Amen.
She's actually a mechanical engineer, and she works. She single-handedly builds turbine engines for A320 Airbuses, and then installs them herself. It's really fascinating the fact that she does all that on her own. But I'm trying to get.
That's an amazing woman, and those, she looks like somebody that's strong, but that's very impressive.
Yeah, she's got one of those scissor lift things that she helps her do it, but. Right now, I'm trying to get her to install the engines with 4 bolts, and she insists on 3 because I don't like it when I'm going down the runway and the engine is jiggling as we're going down the runway. That bothers me.
I think that bothers all of us.
Yeah, so we're kind of in a standoff right now, but she's an engineer too. Anyways, okay, so you don't seem to want to tell us. You don't want to get us out of your 20s. Is there something that happened in your 30s that you'd rather not talk about, or like when do we get to the front? When do we get to the part where you buy a house and you start building the layout?
Well, we could jump right to that. A couple notes just to move out of the 20s. That is, I guess I am stuck in the past in a lot of ways. I like to pretend that's not the case. But so long story short, my sister's long illness came to an end. She passed away in 2003. Amanda Abeles. So it's, that was sort of another kick in the pants after mom's passing. And again, just a reiteration, not to dwell on the negative stuff, but a reiteration of just how important it is to, if you believe in something and you love something, to make it go. Sitting around and waiting for somebody else to get started with something you love is it's just not something I'm wired with. And so as the 20s went on, I went through my career at Transit and was having a blast. Got promoted here, got promoted there. And then once I got to be, it was a couple of years. I lived in Westfield, New Jersey for a couple of years, rented a house with some college buddies. Again, built some trains on the side, but for the most part, really wasn't doing a whole lot of modeling. And then my dad was introduced to a woman that he was dating. This is right about my late 20s. And this woman, her husband had passed away. And my dad went on a date with her, and he calls me. He says, "David, you got to come to Babby's house." I said, "Dad, you told me it was your first date." He says, "You got to come. You got to come right now." I said, "Dad, I'm not coming out on your first date with somebody else. No, I won't do it." So next time he calls, he says, "Come on." So I went up there. Babby's husband was a huge Lionel train fan, and he built in this large house on a farm. A horse farm estate in Western New Jersey. He built, my goodness, the thing had to be 20 by 70, 20 by 65, a huge Lionel 3-rail layout with loops of track and all the industries and the lights and all this stuff. So I called Jack because Jack, his father's a big O-gauge guy. He said, "Jack, let's go." So Jack got all his stuff out of his boxes from college. We all went to Babby's, and Babby said, "I can't believe you love it. Why don't you come back, get it running?" I said, "Okay." So we might have to change a few things. She's like, "No problem, Bob. My late husband would love to see it run. Do whatever you want. It's yours." So Jack and I came back, and we came back weekly for about 6 years. And we go down there with some Molsons or some Yinglings or some we bring a 12-pack of beer and a pizza, and the two of us would go down there, and we got this whole layout running again. And Jack, who would always love the operational side of railroads, he actually ended up going to Rutgers and getting a master's degree in city and regional planning, but always loved trains like I did, and has a brain that can think about things on a different dimension. So he ended up working in rail service planning at NJ Transit a couple of years after I did. We had an internship at the same time, and he worked himself into this rail service planning thing. So rail service planning that's the art and science of scheduling trains.
Right.
And that includes the crews, the equipment, and the trains. And when you're dealing with those two little tunnels in New York City that Amtrak has that we use, Jack is now the senior director of rail service planning. He is in charge of every single train schedule that NJ Transit runs, about 700 a day.
You're talking like now today, Jack's in charge of all the trains.
Correct.
And the
he works. I manage all the stations. He manages every train schedule. He works a floor above me. We've been best friends for 32 years.
You guys must kind of once in a while just kind of pinch yourselves, going.
It is remarkable. You can't make it up, Lionel. I mean, this is the thing. And that's why I keep mentioning, some of the dark stuff is that you can't make up where we are. Like if somebody had said, "Hey, Dave, when you're 42, you're going to be the general superintendent of stations at New Jersey Transit. You're going to have an HO layout that people want to come operate with you. You're going to have 3 happy kids and a wife, but you're going to have, this person having passed on and this person, all that." I would have said, "Man, I mean, how do you not sign up for that?" So I feel so thankful and so lucky to be where I am. I mean, it is an honor. Absolutely. And I know that sounds sort of cheesy, but
no.
It is an honor nonetheless.
What's Jack's last name?
Jack is Jack Travachino, Italian last name. And so it's Trabachino. And he's a fella, again, I mean, I met him in 5th grade and that first day of class, and, it was alphabetical again. So I said, I had to stand up. I was in the front left corner, and I said, "Well, I'm going home for the weekend. I'm going to play with my trains." And I heard somebody say something, and then I had to sit down. And then the whole class had to speak because we were all talking about what we were going to do for the weekend. And then he's Travachino, TRA. He's in the back right corner. He stands up and says, "I'm going home to play with my trains too, just like that guy in the corner." And I stood up and I looked back at him, and the teacher says, "Both of you sit down or you're going to be in detention." And the rest of that 5th grade year, Jack and I were joined at the hip. We, one weekend or the other, we were at one or the other's house. I was playing with his Lionel trains. He was playing with my HO trains. And even in 5th or 6th grade, I mean, Jack he would run a train in a circle a certain number of times, and then it would stop and it would set 2 cars off, and then it would run in a circle a bunch of times. He was already thinking about rail service planning.
Wow.
He was already thinking about scheduling.
So rail service planning. So he's in charge of the scheduling of the 700 trains that the New Jersey Transit runs.
Correct.
And is he in charge of the crews as well, or
people under him and working alongside him deal with the crews? And that's been a real consternation for New Jersey Transit because due to the budget cuts and a lot of political pressure, things haven't always gone as we'd hoped. And they ended up not training enough engineers for a couple of years. And so we've been short of engineers. And when you don't have enough engineers on a commuter railroad and you annul a few trains, that means you annul the turned trains, and you end up with the situation where your service is impacted by the number of people you have running your trains. So Jack's been dealing with a real seesaw, trying to keep things on time while not, over-promising. And we both learned a lot about that in the last couple of years. But one of the fun parts is that he's been able to translate a lot of that passion and knowledge to how we run trains on the Onondaga Cutoff.
Right, which we haven't even got to yet. Hey, Bruce, this is like I said, this is only part 1 of your 37-part trilogy. Say, Bruce, how sometimes I can ask blunt questions.
Rumor has,
yeah. So let me just get right to the point here, Dave. I'm assuming then if Bruce and I, Bruce the moderately agitated mailboy, and me the evil overlord, I'm assuming we can ride New Jersey Transit all day for nothing.
Anytime you want to come down, let's go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Let's go.
Road trip.
And even as much fun as that is, I mean, you want to come down and look around Hoboken Terminal, just let me know. Look, I mean, I'm proud of what we do at Transit. I don't think the region works without it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Despite the budget challenges and the personnel challenges and the attrition and all the things that go into managing a big railroad operation in a major metropolitan spot, even a bad day. I mean, what we do deliver is special, and people depend on it. And it's wonderful to be part of something that's that central to life in the New York metro area.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that New Jersey and that part of the world could even operate without the transit system, the New Jersey transit system. I mean, and transit. And let's not forget, we have people all over the world listening to this. You mean the commuter rail system outside of New York City proper?
Well, the commuter rail west of New York City proper. So that's one of the challenges we deal with, is that New York City, of course, is an island. Now, downtown Manhattan is an island. Brooklyn, Queens, they're on Long Island, so they're on an island as well. But you've got three, and really even four, three railroads and then the Port Authority path system. So four major transit systems.
Yeah.
Each of which are moving hundreds of thousands of people a day in both directions, serving New York City alone. Long Island Railroad goes out Long Island out to the east. You got Metro North that goes up into Connecticut and the southern tier in New York, and then NJ Transit, which is to the west. And the fourth one is this path system, which has its own tunnels from the World Trade Center over to Jersey City and then down towards Newark proper. So, all these agencies are separate. They're separately funded. They're separately managed. They have different operating environments. And, again, the history matters in railroading, just like it does in model railroading. And Long Island Railroad is a PRR property. Metro North, largely either New Haven or New York Central. And New Jersey Transit, like we talked about already, was Penn Central, Erie, Lackawanna, and CNJ. So it's even today, it's four different cultures. And
right.
A fascinating dynamic. Every single day, you don't know what you're going to walk into. And so you never get bored. I can tell you that.
Well, yeah, as somebody, I mean, I'm looking at a map of the New Jersey transit system now, and I mean, it's absolutely massive. So, I mean, being the guy that's either your buddy Jack, who's in charge of the trains and the schedules, the 700 trains, or you, who's in charge of all of the stations. I mean, it must be an absolute mass. It must be, like you say, every day is like, because every day there's probably something pops up. I mean, during 9/11, you must have been somewhat involved in that as well, which we better not go down that path because it sounds like a whole bunch more stories. Let me ask you.
That's probably his own podcast on that one. Sure.
I'll just ask one quick question.
Sure, Bruce.
You ride I'm assuming New Jersey Transit into work every day. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I live in a little town called Lebanon. Yep.
Okay, so if you're riding and your train schedule gets all whacked out for whatever, you just pick up the horn and call your buddy Jack and give him a hell?
Oh, are you kidding? I walk upstairs and I say, Jack, what in God's name was going on today in the Raritan Valley line? And Jack says, look, I plan it. Don't blame me. I just plan it. I tell them how it should work. If they just followed my directions, it would be fine. So one of the things about railroading, which is interesting, is that, when it's this intricate and this large, the planning department puts together a hard thought out plan. They go through every single number, every detail, every time slot. They try and put together a plan that'll work, and they model it on computers. They plug it into this computer program called Train Plan or Rail Sim or Train Sim, or I think it's Trains. Oh, in any case, there's a couple software packages, and they blow through this thing, and it shows you the conflicts. It shows you where you have to have your meets, all these different things. But then actually putting it into effect means that you have to crew those trains. The crews have hours of service limits. It also means you have to have equipment for those trains. And that includes 90-day inspections, 180-day inspections. So it's just the scheduling is a three-dimensional matrix, right? You've got distance, you've got time, and then you've got variables like crewing and all that stuff. But if you actually start putting in all the mechanical variables, all the crew variables, you're starting to talk about a multi-dimensional spreadsheet, something it's an Excel spreadsheet that comes up at you off the page and then has a diagonal through it too, or two diagonals. Yeah. And so it's a complicated mess. I've come to appreciate in my short 20 years in the industry that people that are doing service planning, they have a different way of thinking about things. They can see things that I can't see. And Jack, I mean, talk about the luck of meeting somebody like this when you're 10 years old in middle school. and he doesn't hate your guts, and you move on. And so now I get to learn from him every time I talk to him about what he's doing at work. It blows your mind. It's fantastic.
It must be.
And then you throw in the variable of weather, and there you go.
Oh, good Lord. And then fall leaves with the slippery rails.
Right.
I mean, and then strikes and political funding and, you have to stop the train at the station because, whatever reason. And you can't make this stuff up. Then personalities, because the people that manage it in the field, of course, those aren't the planners. So you've got dispatchers, operators, you've got yard masters, train masters. They're the ones that actually have to look at your plan and then make it work in the field.
Right.
And that's a whole other ball of wax. So it's an adventure.
It must
fascinating.
It is. I mean, Bruce, it's not that we're ignoring you, Dave, but Bruce, this is a phenomenal story that him and his friend from grade 5 have ended up as these two important positions at New Jersey Transit.
No kidding. What are the odds?
I know. And then the highlight of their careers, of course, is to be on the podcast.
Exactly.
No, make no mistake. I think next time it'd be fun to have Jack and I together if you guys would like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking the same thing.
Absolutely.
I think I can't overstate, and I'm prone to overstatement, as you guys have already figured out. I can't overstate the importance of him being involved with me from a modeling standpoint from from the earliest days when I met him, because he sees things in a way that I cannot, and the two of us together make a pretty interesting team where we really go at each other to refine each other's ideas and disprove why we should do something or not. And you end up with something that's better than what we could have come up with on our own, either one of us.
So is Jack a model railroader?
Jack is a model railroader. And it sort of goes to the definition of model railroader. I think one of the things we look at, again, is model railroading running trains or building structures or building a layout? Is it hosting an operating session? Are you modeling a railroad, or are you modeling railroading?
Right.
And Jack is someone who uses computers to model railroading professionally.
Right.
He'll take train schedules and he'll download them into the computer, and he models what would happen in real life to see how he needs to change things. And so Jack, he's the one that I took the O gauge layout, Abeles, and started running trains in these big circles, and then figuring out how we're going to time things out to create an operation on an O gauge layout. And so he was never a builder. I grew up a builder because I had nobody else to really to spend time with. I mean, for me, it was all I could do is to build. For him, he was reading the magazines, running his model trains because he didn't enjoy the building part. So it's almost a match from day one, where his modeling is more based on operations. My modeling is more based on infrastructure or mechanical.
Right.
And so you add those two things together and you come up with a layout or, a modeling experience that includes not only equipment that's modeled as prototypically as reasonably possible, over territory that's reasonably plausible, but you've also got an operation that is fantastic. Like I would never have been able to come up with the operation we have on the OC. We call the Onondaga Cutoff the OC, in quotes, but we would never have had the OC operation to the point that it is without Jack's influence.
So does Jack live anywhere near you, or?
About 35 minutes away.
Okay. So he's involved in the operating sessions on your layout?
He is my right-hand guy at my operating sessions. And we mentioned Rich Wisniewski earlier in the session as the guy that turned me on to the modeler's life to start with. He actually he's the director of contracts at NJ Transit. Jack and I met him at NJ Transit.
Wow. So time out here, Bruce, or Dave. Bruce, it looks like the AM, what do we call this? The Modeler's Life Network.
The AML Modeler's Life?
AML Network is going to be...
The AML Network.
Is going to become an integral part of New Jersey Transit.
I'm thinking.
I think it's... Guys, I'm telling you, there's something to be said for coming together And in a world where all we hear about is why we should be further apart and fear and strife and all the stuff that goes on. Look, what you guys have done is bring people together in a way that I don't think has really been done before, at least in model railroading.
Certainly not this way.
I mean, again, and it's, you look at the way that social media has eroded these barriers. And, Lionel, I know, you talk a lot about social media on these podcasts. I would argue with good reason, because it really has changed the way human beings interact. And, on the railroad, when I hired out, you couldn't admit that you loved trains, that you had quote unquote toy trains at home. You never said you were a model railroader. I never told Jimmy Cannella or any of the guys in my first couple jobs on the railroad that I loved trains. And today, it's just not that big of a deal.
Yeah, right. I think there's a lot more prototype or one-to-one railroaders that are interested in model railroading than we can even imagine.
I think you're right, and I think as social media wears down these walls, we're gonna, you'll find a lot of prototype railroaders on the Facebook pages for short lines or for Conrail modelers. I'm part of the Conrail modelers Facebook group, as well as Conrail History and Conrail History 2 and all these different groups. I love train orders for that reason as well. You can tap into the knowledge of these guys that actually ran these machines, the guys that actually delivered the service in the field. These guys, they were completely inaccessible to us even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And today, all you have to do is go online, pick your venue. You're going to find something that's actual prototype advice on how to model something. It's never been a better time to be a model railroader. Not any time in history.
No, that's for sure. And the best part now is too, because you're part of the AML family. If you get pulled over in Somerset, New Jersey, just tell them it'll be Joe Desmond. It'll pull you over. Just tell him you know me. You'll be good to go.
I listened to his podcast with you guys. I've not met Joe yet, but I'd be honored to meet him. He's as an N scale Conrail guy. He knows what he's doing. I've appreciated his Facebook stuff for quite some time.
You guys got to get together because you can't be that far apart. I would say,
yeah. It can't be more than 150 miles. I would say 2.5 hours at most. He's way down in southern New Jersey, and I'm up fairly north and west. But you're right. it can't be too far.
Lebanon doesn't look like it's north and west. Looks more like it's more west, but not necessarily north.
That's correct. Yeah, you can go another hour north of me as well if you want to go up. For example, part of the funny story here. So all
right. Now time out. If you have listened, time out. Yeah. If you have listened to the podcast, you know that you tell the story, and we'll determine whether or not it's funny.
Oh, well, I stand corrected.
Yeah. So it's a story somewhere, and it could be a funny story. Let's go with that.
Can I say that it's an interesting story? I've heard that's illegal too.
Yeah, no, you can't. You can say, "Hey, you could say something like, "Hey, this might be a funny story." Let me tell you.
Oh, I gotta say, "Hey, I got a story to tell."
You go.
It might be funny.
Oh.
or it might not.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's true. It can go either way. That's true.
You got a 50-50 shot at it.
Yeah. Bruce and I are in a particularly good mood tonight, so there's a good chance we'll rate it as funny.
I think we'll maybe up those odds, maybe 70-30.
Yeah, exactly. All right,
I want to vote for me being part of this next time on the same kind of night. But so I build this layout down here. I buy the house. So this is 30. I met my wife on the train on the way to work.
Oh my God.
Well, of course you did.
So
all right, now, hang on. You know what? You go stand over in the corner for a minute, and I got to talk to Bruce.
Okay. I'll go stand in the corner.
Yeah.
1 second. Okay. I'm walking over.
Yeah. Bruce is.
Yes.
I'm exhausted.
Oh man, it's yeah, it is. But he's such a ball of fire. He's kind of like firing energy into us as we're going along.
Absolutely. But do I look tired?
Absolutely fantastic.
Do I look tired? Do you think he can tell that I look tired?
I think you're covering it pretty good.
Okay. All right. Okay. Come on.
Particularly with your camera off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, Dave. So let's hear that. You met your wife on the train.
Can I come back? Are you sure I can come back?
Yeah, you can come back now. Come on back.
Oh, okay. All right. Here I am. Okay, I'm back.
So I can imagine, Bruce, it's something like this. He's walking up and down the train looking for suitable women going, hey, I work for the transit here. I can get you a free ride.
I don't. Is there anything worse in life than being thought of as the creepy train guy?
No.
No.
I
one or two things maybe.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Yeah.
See, Bruce, as an engineer, I'm sure you have a couple ideas, but I'll tell you, that's the last thing I wanted to be. So this girl was getting on the train after I bought my house out here in Lebanon, New Jersey, riding the former C&J main line to work. I work down in Newark, so it's a 1-seat ride. It's great. It's about an hour. It's a long
time out. So, did you catch that railroad reference? Transit worker reference, Bruce?
Yes.
Did you fall off your chair?
No, it's the cat screwing around again.
It's a 1-seat ride.
Yes.
There you go. I like that. And by the way, that's the Raritan Valley line that you're on, former Central New Jersey.
That is correct. Exactly.
So this is a 1-seat ride that you're on because you go down to Newark Penn Central Station. Do you go that far?
Newark Penn Station, yeah, which is the pretty much the end of the Raritan Valley line historically, and the New Jersey Transit headquarters building is right across the street.
Now, how do you say Newark?
Newark.
All right.
But if you go further east, so in New Jersey, we have this, the people that are out in the western parts, like me, in northern parts, fellows like Ted Pamprin or Tony Custer, those guys that are up there in northern New Jersey. We all look at the people that are east of 287, which is the interstate that sort of bubbles around New York City and New Jersey. And if you're east of 287, you're used to traffic, more traffic than we are. And you don't call it Newark, you call it Nork, N-O-R-K.
Okay. I can do that.
And there's no oranges in New Jersey. It's orange.
All right. Okay. Well, do you know how to say
South Orange?
Do you know how to say Toronto?
I say Toronto.
Yeah, it's the second T is silent.
But that's because I spent a lot of time in Syracuse.
There you go. I like exactly.
So there's a comedy. So we don't have a father in Syracuse. We got a father.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the father.
So let's get back to this story about how you're picking up women on the train. So you bought your house in Lebanon.
So this girl gets on the train and she's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But the kind of beautiful that you can just appreciate because there's nothing standoffish. She's just straightforward and not all laden down with makeup or material stuff. She's getting on the train. She puts on her headphones and she listens on the way to work and she listens on the way back. And I said, man, boy, what a pretty woman. So, I tried to get it off my mind and it didn't work. So I talked to one of my friends at work and this girl that worked in marketing department at NJ Transit. She said, you should get her a flower and just give it to her on the train. That would be so romantic. And this girl had a wife and everything. And I said, Marcy, are you kidding? I'm going to get on a commuter train in the New York metropolitan area and just give a girl a flower and expect she's going to think I'm a homeless guy. She's going to think that I'm the creepy train guy that's going to haunt her dreams. And Marcy's like, no, like you should totally do this. But you don't do it with something crazy like a rose. You should do it with like a Gerber daisy. And I said, what's a Gerber daisy? And she says, it's this flower. And she describes. So sure enough, I got a Gerber daisy. I got on the train. I was all confident, ready. And she didn't get on the train on the way home. So I carried the Gerber daisy. I can walk to the train station. I walked down the hill to my house where I was living by myself. I put the Gerber daisy in a glass of water. I strung it up on the railing so that it wouldn't lean over. Got up the next morning, took the Gerber daisy, untied it, carried it back to the train station, got on the train, and she got on. And she sat right in front of me.
Right.
So I gave her the flower. I said, this is for you. I'd love to have lunch with you sometime. And she was like, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And we went to lunch a couple of days later. And she says, I have to be honest. I have a boyfriend. Right. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But you smiled. You said this was great. And now so we went back and forth. I tried to forget about her. The second time that didn't work either. There was a bunch of, things that happened where I found out when we were at lunch, and she had gone to Cornell University in Ithaca. I was like, wow, I went to Syracuse. She's like, oh, that's not too far apart. We got talking. It was a great date. It was a lot of fun. But I don't want to compete with a boyfriend that's been around for years. So I tried not to, but it didn't work. I kept getting reminded about her. I couldn't get her off my mind. And she broke up with a boyfriend, and we went on a date to New York City on transit in December 2005. And a year and a half later, I proposed, and we got married in 2008. And she moved in here with me in my house, and so now it's our house, except that it's still my crazy mess of a basement.
Right. What station was she getting on at?
She was getting on at North Branch.
Oh, okay, just a couple of stops down from Lebanon.
I'm impressed with your transit system knowledge. Yes, that is true. And so I called her North Branch. When I was talking to the conductor, I was like, that girl that gets on at North Branch, like, man, she's amazing. He's like, yeah, she's good looking. I said, I was going to, next day I said, have you seen the North Branch girl on the train? He's like, no. And so she eventually became North Branch. And it turns out, she tells the story that, yeah, she's like, you were train guy. Like I was talking to my friends from college, like, oh, I didn't see train guy today. Or, they'd say, oh, it's train guy. And so the whole thing ends up being another one of these layered stories that, I wish I could tell shortly, but I don't seem to have the ability to do that.
Nah, that which is perfect for podcasting, actually. So does North Branch girl have an actual name?
It's Kristen.
There you go.
Kristen Dolger with a K and an E. And Dolger is an interesting name. Well, it may be an interesting name.
Right.
Because her great-great-grandfather owned a massive brewery in Manhattan called the Peter Dolger Brewing Company.
Wow.
And so when I was looking for a tenant for my model railroad short line, I wanted to put a brewery on it because I love beer. I love beer culture. And it's a fun industry that when railroads serve them, there's a big one in Newark. Budweiser has a giant plant in Newark. And so there's always cool covered hoppers and stuff outside of that. And so I wanted to have a brewery on the short line. And sure enough, I said, well, hey, I might as well make it the Dolger Brewery because that honors the history of the family. And sure enough, he had all sorts of old labels from beer bottles and things I was able to scan and make signs for the company. So it's been a lot of fun to make a fictional Dolger Brewing Company.
Bruce is on mute.
Yes, I was on mute.
Okay. We have a lot of really interesting guests on the podcast, don't we?
Yes, we do.
A lot of interesting guests. Dave, you're drinking.
Yes,
you're drinking again, aren't you?
No, I was on mute myself, and it's funny because every morning we have this morning call at work, and everybody on the rail, all the managers on the railroad are on it. So there's 20 or 30 people on this call. Rich Wisniewski, Jack, myself. Again, Jack and I are in a morning meeting every day with the president of the company at our railroad. Like, you can't make this up. You can't make this. It's absurd.
Yeah.
But I always screw up the mic. I'm always on mute. They say, hey, Dave, give me the elevator escalator status. And you hear crickets. Crickets. I have to admit, so the mute thing, Bruce, don't worry about it. We do it all the time.
So can you give us today's escalator elevator status?
I can. Number 14 at Newark Penn Station was getting a new poly chain, which is a part of the drive system. Number 8 was a quick reset. We're doing a midlife overhaul at Cranford on the westbound elevator. We're doing a door replacement due to vandalism on Elizabeth, and I think that's the eastbound elevator. I'd have to look at the report. And then New York Penn Station, they don't report to me, but they reported to me for today's call that they had one escalator out for a step chain replacement.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of what I thought was the situation, Bruce. You and I have often talked about the elevator escalator situation on the New Jersey Transit.
All the time. It's like a day doesn't go by we're not trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah.
But this is the funny thing, you guys. Like, railroading involves all these nitty-gritty details.
Well, sure.
And we don't, and it makes sense when you think about it. But when you look at so much of the modeling process, it's like, oh, how did the operating session go? Or how's the weathering? Or, Rapido, Jason Strawn, a guy I look up to. I mean, amazing models. All these models have something you have to play with or tweak as you put it on your layout. But there's a bunch of people all upset about the steps on the Rapido B36-7 or the lights are it's a whole inch off, and they promised me it was going to be perfect. And it's like, guys, nothing in life works that way. Like, you got to relax, got to have a beer or something. Just take it easy. And working on the real railroad is the same way. There's all these intricate details that are part of the experience that you just have to learn how to deal with. It's part of what we do.
That's for sure. So I think we've made it up to, we didn't even get to the part where you bought the house yet. So, and we're stopping now. And we haven't even talked one single sentence about his model railroad yet, Bruce.
No. We just got into preliminary round.
Yeah, exactly. This is early in the season. I don't know if we should thank Rich Winiski or go and beat him about the head with a wet noodle.
I definitely say we should thank him.
Okay. And I guess we're going to have to get Rich on here now because we got to.
Well, yeah.
Exactly. So
Rich and Jack and.
Well, I think at first we better handle them one at a time.
Yeah, it might get a critical mass.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when the train goes on the bridge fast. I mean, I think if we brought them all in at once, we'd
exceed the loading.
Yeah, we'd
exceed the podcast Cooper rating.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think the M modeler's life can handle the structural load of those three guys, and we still got to get through Dave first.
Well, the impact load, right?
Yes.
But the whole thing is, the group approach to things. We do it on the real railroad. We do it here on the model railroad, and having these. I call them wisdom keepers. It's not just best friends. These are people that I go to, not just for modeling advice and prototype advice on the job, but family advice. I mean, we've all struggled through. Is your kid going to be okay, or how's your wife dealing with things? And it's a group effort. I really believe that I feel very fortunate to have guys like that in my sphere, to be able to bounce ideas off of. I mean, it's both Rich and Jack are huge contributors to the Onondaga Cutoff and to the operating sessions. It really wouldn't be as much fun. It probably wouldn't even be possible without them. All
right, let's ask one model railroad question. How many guys do you need to operate your layout?
We can do it with as few as 9 or 10, but we can. Yeah, the optimal is about 15 or 16.
Wow. And how big is the layout?
About 25 by 32.
Okay, so it's a good size. And you started on it, I'm assuming, after you bought the house or when you bought the house.
Correct. Yeah. When I bought the house, my brother, I was living with him and a couple college buddies down in Westfield, New Jersey, also on the Raritan Valley line. I bought the house in December 2004. Started the layout, I would say, right around 2008. And that was after we repointed the foundation. It's an old farmhouse. We replaced the boiler, all those kinds of things. And first operating session was in October of 2011.
Wow.
With, no scenery, very bare bones, command control, but no signals. So all the goodies came later. But I really take the advice. There's a lot of this is going back to what we were talking about before. There's a lot of modelers in northern New Jersey, central New Jersey, that I didn't even know were here, because in back in the day of Model Railroad or Railroad Model Craftsman, I didn't know where those magazines came from. I was a kid in the 80s, and I didn't even look at where the stuff came from. So Facebook, social media allows you to contact people based on anything. And it turns out there's a bunch of people in our area that have a really incredible model railroading talent. I mean, Jerry Diedzik, who writes the operators column for Model Railroader, he's only 10 miles west of me. He's somebody I've looked up to for years. I actually graduated from high school with his daughter.
Wow.
Jack and I both did. So he's writing for Model Railroader. Tony, Carson's Publishing was right up in Newton, which is it's less than an hour from where I live now. I had no idea. And there's all these different model railroaders. There's Dave Ramos and Phil Monette, who you guys interviewed. And I love, that was a great podcast. He's in New York City. There's all these different communities around. An unbelievable model railroad operation. And Jack and I had no idea. We had babbies. We put it together ourselves after somebody else had passed on. So we started to build this Onondaga Cutoff. We had no idea that all these people were within an hour of us.
Yeah.
So, no concept.
We haven't even figured out how you abandoned the Great American West and ended up on Conrail, but that's for the next show.
Okay.
We better finish off. Whatever happened with your dad and Babby?
They went their separate ways. My dad, as a true Abeles, had great advice, but terrible timing. And so broke the news that he had broke the news that he fell in love with a different woman at Babby's granddaughter's graduation.
Oh man.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether to be proud or ashamed, but it's certainly remarkable. It's classic Abeles, I'll tell you that.
Oh, you'll remember it, that's for sure.
We will remember it. Good call, Bruce. So we moved on. But my dad ended up, again, another layer. My dad ended up falling in love with a woman that was living in Pattonburg, New Jersey, introduced to him by a mutual friend. Pattonburg is on the original Lehigh Valley, then Conrail, now Norfolk Southern Lehigh line, their lifeline into northern New Jersey from the west.
This Pattonburg, you said.
Pattonburg, yeah. There's one of the longest tunnel in New Jersey is actually in Pattonburg. It's 4,200 feet long or so. I spent a lot of teenage and 20s years down there taking pictures. But
have you noticed something, Lionel?
What?
His knowledge of New Jersey is geographic knowledge. It's what railroad line it was on.
Yeah.
Ask what highway it's on, probably could tell you, but it was on the old Raritan line or this or that. So
yeah.
That's absolutely amazing how he ties everything together with the old railroad.
Well, and I'm looking at a map of the New Jersey transit system, and I'm trying to figure out, is it the purple or the gray or the yellow line? One of those, Pattonburg?
Pattonburg, it's on the Norfolk Southern line. So it would be south. It's like south and west of where High Bridge is on the Raritan Valley line.
Oh, okay.
So they don't show it because it's a freight line only. So basically, if you look at that map, you come west out of Newark on the Raritan Valley line, you go through Union and Roselle Park.
Yeah.
And then there's a little kink in the track at just west of Roselle Park.
Okay.
And the Lehigh line would go straight there because we actually run on the Lehigh line as far as Roselle Park goes. And then it basically parallels the Raritan Valley line to the south and goes out straight to Allentown, via sort of the I-78 corridor to the west.
So you said you worked on Babby's layout for 6 years, you and Jack.
6 or 7 years, and we worked on it hard. Yeah, we rebuilt the whole thing.
So was your dad going out with Babby for 6 or 7 years?
That's correct.
and then he drops that bomb at her granddaughter's graduation.
It was not a good scene. I wasn't there, thank God. But Babby wouldn't call me. I wanted to go over and run the trains, and she wouldn't call me back for like 3 months. Lionel, it was not cool. I was like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, all of our stuff is in that basement. He's like, well, I wanted to be honest. I couldn't be dishonest. I said, Dad, could you wait till the day after? Get sick or something? Come on. I'm not smooth, but I'm smoother than that. Good Lord. Yeah, take after your mother, he says. Oh, great.
So I think maybe the story, the way I'm reading the story, Bruce, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, as always. The Abeles boys have been wreaking havoc on the New Jersey, central New Jersey for quite some time now.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Well, and don't forget, it's the Abeles boys.
Abeles. Okay.
Yeah, not that I never get really offended by it, but just for the record, for what it's worth.
Well,
but yeah, we've been causing heartburn for quite a few years here in New Jersey. Yes.
Well, we're going to have to bring this episode to an end, and we're going to have to start all over again very shortly so that we can get more of the story, because we never even got to the layout. We never even talked about building the layout. We never even talked about any of that stuff. So, like I say, I'm not sure if we should be thanking Rich or hunting him down with a wet noodle. So we'll have to figure that out.
Well, and again, it's up to you guys. I'm happy to bring either Rich or Jack or whatever. With both of those guys are integral, and we could bring them along next time or however you want to handle it.
Yeah, I think Bruce. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we'll have meetings, of course, several series of meetings.
Yes.
But I'm thinking we need to finish with Dave on his own first before we start.
I think we get him out of the way, so that'd be about a month and a half.
Yeah.
And then we can bring the others in one at a time.
I have faith. I feel confident, Dave, that you'll recover, but you're going to need a few more sessions yet.
You guys, I still can't believe that I'm actually talking to you guys like this. This is fun, and I really appreciate it. I'm very thankful to be included. Thank you very much.
Bruce, can you give out our email address?
Yes. Our email address, because after you listen to this, you'll be wanting to send us emails and tell us what an interesting and fascinating guy Dave is. Or
timeout. Or you also will have stories about the Abeles boys in New Jersey.
Yes, yeah. There's a possibility that somewhere along one of those railroad lines will have a story. Okay. All right, our email address, Modler's Life. It's Modlers with one L. modlerslife@gmail.com.
That's right. And we have a website, modlerslife.com. If you go there, you can see the crew and lineup of the most recent episodes and a couple of clinics and all kinds of stuff. And that's it. And then the other thing we have, Dave, at the very end, do you know if you're a regular listener, you might know what it is you're supposed to say.
I think I'm going to need a refresher on that just to make sure I don't talk too much. Happy
rails to you.
Otherwise, you know me by this point, I'd say too much.
Possibly. But, so that's what you got to say is happy rails to you.
Happy rails to you.
Right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Let me go into the back closet here and see if I can find
get the scroll.
Yeah. Well, Dave, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
happy rails to you.
And now it's time for the New Jersey Transit Elevator Escalator Report. Take it away, Dave.
Good morning, everybody. Cranford eastbound's back in service. Plainfield westbound also back in service. Vendor had a good day out there yesterday. Hamilton number 3 is out. We think that one's going to be a brake adjustment, but we're going to check it in this morning. The vendor's on his way. At Westmont, we have the DCA out there today taking a look at the testing on the doors, making sure that the safety edges are back in tolerance after the outage yesterday. Newark Penn Station number 3 is out with a skirt panel reset, and Newark Penn Station number 17 is back in service after a reset this morning.
It's another Lincoln Homer.